Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and today we're going to be looking at Noivern GX, one of the most controversial and potentially powerful cards from the Burning Shadows set, and we're going to be looking at the best partners for this card, what it aims to achieve, and basically where its place stands in the metagame, looking at the Worlds format. So, let's start off with the basic concept. This is an item locking card. As you can see, Noivern GX on the right there. His first attack for a dark and colourless energy deals 50, and your opponent can't play any item cards from their hand during their turn. You can see in brackets I say hopefully on turn 1. Now, Noivern is a stage 1 Pokemon, but using the likes of Wally and Double Dragon Energy, we can actually use Distort. If we are going second, we could do it on our turn 1, which is incredible for us, and we've seen Seismitoad do this and lock people out of games entirely, and we're going to try and do the same thing with Noivern. That is the main concept, the main attack that Noivern GX will be using for the majority of the game. And then we also have the option of Sonic Volume, which does 120 damage for for 1 Psychic, 1 Dark, 1 Colourless. And additionally, the effect of the attack is that the opponent can't play any special energy cards from their hand during their next turn. So, against certain matchups, it is going to be important to lock out special energy cards. The likes of Decidueye, the likes of Vespiquen, the likes of Gyarados, all these sorts of things that love using double colourless energy, they're pretty much going to get denied entirely. And that is going to be important. And it's also just better damage. You're doing 120 instead of just the base of 50. So you can be finishing off things a little bit nicer. And also we should bear in mind that 120 is the benchmark for dealing with Garbodors in a one-hit KO manner. And that's also going to be important for you. So a lot of people sleep on the fact that he can use his second attack, even if there are options when the opponent isn't playing special energy. It's still important just to have that amount of damage output. With the Choice Band, you're doing 150. With the Kukui, that's 170. So even things like Tapu Lele GX gets one-shot by this guy, potentially. So he can have a bit of, like, hidden burst potential that people aren't really talking about too much with the card. So that's important to note. Basically, what we're going to try and pair him with is a bunch of Super Scoop-Ups and Acerolas as well. Because Distort isn't doing the most amount of damage possible, and we're trying to continue the item lock to stifle the opponent's setup, the entire concept is going to be, well, we're not dealing too much damage. Normally it's like a 3-hit KO, even with Choice Band. So instead of sort of getting behind in the prize race, we're going to reset the opponent's damage by using cards like Acerola and like Super Scoop Up, so that we can simply then promote a new Noibat, evolve into another Noivern GX, attach a Double Dragon Energy again, and continue to attack. So this is really where the strength lies, because we're able to abuse so many of these cool item tool cards and continue to set up, whilst all the while preventing the opponent from doing all these shenanigans. They can't use their rare candies. There's quite a handful of stage 2s out there now with Guardy. There's also Metagross. There's also Vikabulu. All these things are very rare candy focused. Ultra Balls in general, VS Seekers in general, all these sorts of things. We're going to be shutting them off, and it is still devastating item lock at times. So something that should not be slept on at all. He does also have the spread damage attack of Boom Burst GX, which deals 50 to each of your opponent's Pokemon, not applying weakness and resistance to the bench, which is pretty cool for you. And this is also an under-talked about aspect of Noivern, and it's one reason why I actually think the card is crazy good. This spread is just such a good amount of damage. 50 to everything is really powerful, and because we already have other good spread Pokemon like Tapu Koko, even things like bats can be used to increase damage. I'll talk about partners in a moment. But using this spread to our advantage means we can just outright win certain matchups that you may not think are favoured at all. And because we could just do this spread and take a bunch of prizes all at once, whilst combining it with something like an Espeon EX, Noivern can actually have a handful of really good matchups. So something to bear in mind, his GX attack is one that you will have to use in certain matchups. I'm looking at you, Gardevoir, because you can't distort for the entire game. Eventually they'll get set up and just start rampaging through you, and it's at that point where we have to Boom Burst and start going for a spread devolve play. But having this all wrapped into one neat package is amazing for us. It also has free retreat, it also has 200 HP, so many reasons why Noivern GX, I believe, is a very, very strong card, and one that's definitely worth trying to make work for Worlds. So let's talk about this combo, trying to get the turn 1 item lock. That's what the deck is all about. We've seen the Wally combo work with decks like Trevenant in the past, and currently in Expanded, where basically you will use, well, it was back then it was Jirachi EX, now we have Tapu Lele, which is even better for us because Lele is a lot less vulnerable and it's actually an option to attack with as well. But regardless, you use Tapu Lele to search out the deck, a Wally, and then simply evolve into your stage 1 on the first turn. Unlike Trevenant, we actually need to attack, so with the Trev deck, all you need to do is find Wally, and sometimes if you missed energy attachments, that's kind of okay because you've still established the lock. But for us, we need to also be finding a double Dragon Energy. We do have things like Energy Loto and Shaymin though, so it shouldn't be too difficult in order to get this. And from early testing, it's easy to get the Noivern for certain, and finding the double Dragon Energy is also relatively consistent and easy. Bear in mind, if you go first, it doesn't matter anyway. You don't need the Wally at all, so you have 2 turns to draw into the combo pieces, and that's, you know, never going to be an issue for you. So, yeah, it's not like we need to play 4 Energy Lotto, but you may see a couple in my list just to make sure that we do cash in on getting the turn 1 item lock when we are able to. So, the biggest discussion I'm having with other players and internal discussions with myself is how are we going to play Noivern? He is clearly a very good card. I've just gushed about him for a good couple of minutes, talking about why I think he is worth looking at, but how come we haven't figured out the perfect partner yet? Well, potentially that's because there isn't a perfect partner, and we have to pretty much carve out the best we can and accept a few bad matchups here or there. So, the one I'm hearing most people talk about is Garbodor. Both of these Garbodors have their pros and their cons. The good thing is you get to establish ability lock alongside item lock. This is an age-old tactic that people used back with Seismitoad EX. You would try and Quaking Punch people out of the game whilst ability locking all the while, and because people can't use Field Blower, which is the only means of tool removal, it means that your Garbotoxin is safe the entire game, which means they will never have their abilities online, so they can't be using things like Tapu Lele to search for supporters and remain consistent. It's just going to be very awkward for them. Additionally, Garbodor, the Trashalanche, has been known as a phenomenal attacker. That is still going to be the case for Worlds, and he can provide late game one-hit KOs when we're going for the early game, sort of slower approach. With a lot of these item locking attacks with the Noivern, we can gain back tempo and flip the switch and go into a one-hit KO deck, which is pretty cool. The issues of this is that we really have no answer to Gardevoir. We would have to hope that ability lock helps us enough to win the game alongside item lock. Of course, both these things are very strong, but because we have weakness to Gardevoir GX, they really don't need ramp from their own abilities in order to one-shot us, and it just has too much HP for Noivern to get over, so it's pretty much a really bad matchup, and the Trashalanche Garbodor isn't a valid attacker in the matchup either, because the Gardevoir has the option to GX attack back items, and that's going to be pretty good for them and pretty much negate everything that we want to do. So the Garbodors, they are very, very strong, but the main issue is that we have no answer to Gardevoir, and doing so means you're pretty much losing to one of the most popular decks that we'll see at Worlds, so that doesn't sound like a great idea to me. Additionally, deck slots is an issue. You'll see this for a couple of the cards actually here. Garbodor takes up more deck slots than some of the other techs that I'll mention, because not only do you need to play probably like a 3-3 Garbodor line, a split between the Garbodors plus 3 Trubbish, you also need to play like 3 to 4 Floatstone, and you really don't want to do that when you already play heavy Scoop Up and heavy Acerola. But if you don't play the Floatstones, well, first of all, you can't get Garbotoxin, but second of all, it just means that if you lead Trubbish instead of Noibat, you're going to be really sad because it's hurting your turn 1 potential of getting the Wally combo and attacking straight away. So that is one other issue with Garbodor. Bisharp is another one which I've experimented with just for the retaliate attack, being able to do 90 base damage if you've suffered a knockout the previous turn. Bishop is part metal, so that goes up to 180, but then it is reduced by resistance, so we have to bear that in mind. So even with a choice band, we are just short of a knockout against Gardevoir GX. We actually need things like Professor Kukui, or a Tapu Koko spread, or a Stadium, the Reverse Valley in play, or even like a Delmise to increase us into a one-hit KO on Gardy. So I feel like Bishop isn't a great answer because he's not very proactive. We have to wait for Gardy to start taking the prizes against us. And additionally, he's only really in here for Gardy. He would be useless against everything else. So it was something I tried out, but really hasn't gone too well. Evolutions is an interesting one. Don't forget that Noivern is, of course, a Stage 1 GX Pokemon, so we can, for Worlds at least, take advantage of multi-typing. This could improve our numbers against things like Rayquaza, Decidueye, Golisopod, Metagross, Volk. These are the biggest ones worth mentioning. And the real reason I'm not happy with Evolutions is because we're capped at 50. So 50 goes to 100, which means we're two-shotting. But that would pretty much already be the case if we just stuck a choice band on. We could go to 80, and then you can either use a second attack, or you can use like a Kukui in either of the turns. Or again, things like Bats or Koko can increase this damage into a two-shot range. So even with a choice band, you're doing 160 with weakness, and that's still not one-hit KOing things. So I feel like although we are taking lots of grid typings and hitting higher numbers, it's kind of irrelevant because it doesn't actually change the fact that you still have to two-shot things. It's basically just more overkill, which is a bit of an annoyance. I think where it's most important is against Volcanion, actually, because Volk is naturally quite a difficult matchup unless you play Vaporeon, in which case it does get a lot better for you. So Vaporeon's actually the most impactful one of these, I think, in terms of helping your matchups. Decidueye, you can just get by using the second attack. Stopping them using DCE basically stops them attacking the entire game, and they're reduced to pings, which is pretty grim for them. So, yeah, I would say Vaporeon's the most important evolution. The others, I think you can get around the matchups in other ways. Again, the issues are there's no answer to Gardevoir, and Eevee is a 2 retreat cost Pokemon, or you can play the 1 retreat cost one, but even then, similar to what I was saying with Trubbish, it's a Pokemon that isn't Noibat that will be in the active, and that's going to be bad for your opening turns. Hammers have always been paired with Seismitoad, because it's just universally annoying. Removing energy from the board is inherently so strong because it literally puts your opponent back a turn at times, especially if they don't play Energy Acceleration. The issue is there's a lot of accelerators in the format. There's Volcanion, there's Vikabulu, there's Gardy, all of these things. There's Metagross. None of these things care about hammers too much, so they don't feel like they're in a great spot. Another pro is that these techs aren't Pokemon techs, they're item techs, so you're not going to hinder your turn 1 potential Wally. So that's pretty good for you. On the flip side, though, using items is also bad right now because of Garbodor. And again, the hammers, like I said, aren't useful against Gardy, and that is a matchup that we need to fix pretty much. So you can see I put a star next to the Golbat and the Tapu Koko. These are my 2 favourite partners, and Rare Candy actually did a really nice video about a deck list with Noivern and Bats. I'll leave that in the description below because I believe that's a pretty cool starter list if you want to try out the Golbat build. Today my build is going to be focused on Tapu Koko. But the strengths of Golbat are the fact that you can, by turn 2 at the very least, you can have another free retreater on your board, so you're never too worried about having to throw in extra switching cards just for your tech Pokemon. And the second part is he's a math fixer, which is also going to help your devolve approach against certain matchups like Gardy. So basically the idea is you can use the GX attack of Noivern whilst also having some sneaky bites in there, potentially even swoop across. The attack from Golbat can do an additional bit of spread damage, and just in one turn you're just going to deal with the entire board thanks to an Espeon EX. That's the concept, at least, against Gardy for both the Golbat and the Koko builds, and that's pretty much really cool for you. Additionally, as I was saying earlier, you with a choice band do 80 damage, so 80 to 160 isn't great, but with some extra sneaky bites in there, you can push to 180 or 200 on some of these Stage 1 GX Pokemon or basic EX and GXs. That could be really important for you. All the while, you're never breaking the item lock, which is really good for you. Couple of issues. It does require a lot of deck slots. You probably need like a thick bat line, like a 3-3 minimum, I would say. So that's kind of an issue. And although it is potentially an answer to Gardy, it's really slow. The item lock is going to slow them down, of course, and it means that their setup is sort of half-baked all the time, but it may not be enough. You may not have enough turns of sneaky biting, you may whiff a couple of flips on super scoop-ups and such, and it just puts you behind to the point where they just start rolling too many prizes too quickly, and you never really get time to use the Espeon to its full effect, and it's not ideal for you. With Tapu Koko, however, as soon as you see a Ralts, you just pretty much sack off your Noivern and go, you know what, I'm going to Koko this entire game, maybe use Noivern for one GX attack, and that is it. So the idea is as soon as you see Ralts, you're going for the spread approach, and what's great about Koko is he's a turn 1 retreater, so just like I was saying with Hammers, you still have great percentage chance of getting the turn 1 Wally combo, and your win condition basically just becomes devolve in a couple of matchups for you. Basically, if item lock you've not been able to establish quickly enough, or if it's a matchup where item lock isn't good enough to win the game, you can go for these spread devolve plays, which is pretty cool for you. The issues are that you are in some games giving your opponent items the entire time, so they're actually getting set up while you're hoping that devolve does enough. And another issue is because you're using Flying Flip, it requires more special energy in the deck. The list I'll be showing plays 4 DDE, 4 DCE, and no basic energy at all, so potentially you're weaker against like mirror matches, but I wouldn't expect to see many mirrors for Noivern, to be honest. The final partner is Magearna with Metal Energy. Now, a quick caveat, I believe every Noivern deck will be playing at least one Magearna, just because its ability Mystic Heart is so strong. But if you start playing Metal Energy, it means you can attack with Soul Blaster and one-hit KO Gardevoirs. And unlike with Bishop, this is actually proactive. You can do it on turn 2, even if they haven't started to take prizes, which is cool for you. An issue, however, is that you don't have any energy acceleration in the deck, so it's going to be hard for you to actually power up multiple Magearnas. And because you only have 160 HP and you need to commit 3 energy to yourself, the Guardian's probably going to one-hit KO you back, so they can just deal with one Magearna and carry on with their lives, start carving through the rest of your board. So it's not actually an ideal attacker unless it's going to be your finisher in the matchup, which could be the case. So Magearna is helpful in general and will pretty much always show up in Noivern. It's just whether or not you commit metal energies to the deck to actually fix the matchup or not. So with all that said and done, let's talk about my list. I said a moment ago that we're going for the Koko list. That's because I believe it is the least intrusive and gives us the most amount of space to play with the Noivern itself, so that we can be as consistent as possible to get this item lock going. So let's start off with the main Pokemon. For Noibat, we're using the Breakthrough Noibat because Mysterious Beam is the best attack we have available. It's rare that you'll ever use this attack because, first of all, you want to be Wallying, and second of all, we attach double Dragon Energy, and that can't be attached to Noibat. That can only be attached to Noivern because he's a Dragon type. So it's a shame Noibat's colourless. If only we had a Dragon one. But yeah, we just have to make do with this guy. And then we have 3 of the Noivern GX. Because we're using Wally so often, I feel like we don't actually need a physical 4 count because we're going to dig through the deck for it quite consistently, so it shouldn't be an issue for you. Then we have 3 Tapu Lele GX for our support Pokemon. We want to have a lot of these because we want to find Wally, and throughout the rest of the game it's going to be helpful for us. It is also an additional late game attacking option because we have Double Colorless in here. We can actually use Energy Drive in a pinch. 2 Tapu Koko for this Flying Flip approach. He is a great lead for the deck because of course he's a free retreater, and it means that we can move straight into Noibat and start evolving up, which is great. And he is going to be the way that we try and beat Guardi, just by doing Flying Flips, use Noivern's GX attack, and then as you can see there's an Espeon EX in the deck as well to try and devolve when need be. That could also be the route that we go for against things like Decidueye, bear that in mind. Even if you're not going for a full spread approach to begin with, you can do like 120 damage to one Decidueye, and then they retreat into another one, you can do 120 to that, and then you can devolve just 2 targets at once, and sometimes even that's enough to win your games, so that's pretty cool for you. We're playing them again so that other decks can't devolve us, for one thing. It also means that things like Espeon can't confuse us, which is great. It means that, most importantly, Drampa can't take energies, the special energies off our board with Righteous Edge, because otherwise Drampa is going to be a real pain for us. So this ability is going to protect our double Dragon energies and really help our resources, which is important. And we're also playing just the 1 copy of Shaymin EX. The setup is going to be nice, hopefully get the Wombo combo going. and start drawing into cards to dig for the Wally or the Lele or the energy that we're missing on turn 1 to try and get the item lock established ASAP. So let's have a look at the core items. I'm choosing to play 3 Energy Loto. As I've said, this isn't an absolute guaranteed card to be put in every Noivern deck. I think right now I've tried to be as consistent as possible to say, you know what, item log is the best part about Noivern. So let's just try and get item lock going as much as possible, and let's never whiff Double Dragon. So that's why we've got a high Energy Loto count. We're also playing 4 VS Seeker, 4 Ultra Ball, the standard stuff, 4 Super Scoop Up, as I mentioned, resetting the damage, 200 HP, whilst item locking is also very tanky, difficult to deal with for a lot of decks. You may think that 200 is an easy baseline to hit, but a lot of the time that maths is improved by the likes of Choice Band, and when the opponent is unable to use items, it means they can't put that down. So Noivern is a pretty tanky Pokemon. Scoop Up is going to be really integral for that. It also means if we are to lead an awkward starter like a Tapu Lele or a Shaymin, you can pick it up and actually get usage of their effect as well, which is great for you. And we're actually going to play 3 Choice Band of our own, because people can't field blower it off. I feel like we don't need 4, that's kind of overkill. And because we use Acerola Scoop Up so often, we only really need to have access to like 1 tool at a time, so I'm happy with the 3 count. A few more items. The field blower is going to be nice, getting rid of any tools that got on the board before our item lock was established, or on turns where we haven't been able to establish the lock early on in the game, which is pretty cool. And also we can contest the Stadium War, because we're actually not playing any Stadium in here. We are playing 1 Special Charge. The entire deck is Special Energy focused, just like a Toad Tina. So I like being able to recover these. Thanks to Magearna, it means we don't need to play multiple. I feel 1 is going to be enough, because we can just guarantee 2 more Double Dragons, and that should be enough for the rest of the game. 1 Rescue Stretcher. I'm choosing to play this over just a 4th copy of Noivern GX, I believe. This is more versatile, this is more helpful. If we've had to Sycamore away Espeon, if it gets Lysander KO'd, like if they deal with Magearna, or if a Tapu Koko is knocked out and we need more of them for the spread approach, we can just stretch these back and reuse them. I'm also playing 2 Nest Ball in the deck as well to round out the items. Because we need to be Wallying a lot of the time, it means we don't have the luxury of using a Bridget. And we also play actually a lot of one-of EXs rather than GX Pokemon, so we'd want to use Fan Club if anything. But here we're using Nest Ball instead, because we have cycle with like Shaymin. We need to establish the Noibat, especially if we haven't led with it. We need to find Nest Ball as one of our potential combo pieces also. And Nest Ball is going to be great for fishing out some of these one-offs as well. Against things like Drampa, you want to establish Magearna as quickly as possible. Start establishing multiple Noibats. Start getting Koko out if it's a matchup where we need the damage buff. All these things are important. So yeah, the Nest Balls are pretty good. For supporters, we are playing a bunch of different ones. We are playing 1 Professor Kukui, so hopefully we can push those 3 shots into 2 shots in certain moments. Bear in mind we do have the Tapu Koko to clean things up if need be, or even the Noivern GX attack. So Kukui is in here just for cleaning up math and making it a little bit nicer. Misty Determination as a one-of is one that I loved back when I played Giratina Hammers, because you are able to continue to dig for things like Special Energy whilst not getting rid of all your VS Seekers or other supporter cards, and that is going to be important for you. I'm choosing this over a 4th Sycamore because I believe it is, although less powerful, it is at times the thing that you need to dig for is just 1 card, and Misty is optimal for that sort of situation. 2 Wally is important. I think playing just 1 is kind of risky because the deck really wants to Wally quite a bit, and this is going to be nice getting us into our combo. 2 Acerola. Acerola is going to pick up our damaged Pokemon so we can re-spam them. It's pretty much resetting a turn of attack that Noivern has been dealt, and that is going to be great for you. Double Guzma, because we have the free retreat of Koko, because Noivern himself has free retreat. We're never going to get caught short with a Pokemon stuck in the active, or if we've used the switch effect, we can't move back into our Noivern. It should never be a problem. So it pretty much reads Lysander at the worst of times, but we have the potential benefit of potentially starting a bad Pokemon and your opponent going for a stall of their own approach. We can Guzma our way out of it. Bear in mind we also have Scoop Ups and Acerola, so it should never be an issue. Then we have 3 N and 3 Sycamore as well. I like the shuffle draw approach of N because we are quite slow in actually taking prizes, and Sycamore as well. I've given up the 4th slot for the Misty, but if you just want to go for 4 Sycamore, that's completely up to you. I know people just love Sycamore, but I, for one, love the utility of Misty and just having the extra option. But that's down to you guys testing. Finally, for energy, we are playing 4 Double Dragon, as well as 4 Double Colorless. Double Dragon, the most important, so that we can use Noivern. But the DC also clutch for Sky Returning, Flying Flips, Energy Drive, and also so that Noivern can use its extra attacks. It can do 120 damage, or it can use its GX attack just by slapping the DC on. It may seem a little inefficient to have 4 energy on a Pokemon that has 3 energy attack costs, but it really doesn't affect us too much. And because we have the Magearna, we won't be punished for the special energies by things like Jirachi or Drampa. At least that's our hope. So, here is the list in full, and you can pause the video now, take your screenshots if you want to start testing with this deck. I've toyed around with Noivern a little bit. Obviously, Worlds is creeping up, and I need to turn my attentions to other decks, because I believe making Noivern work for Worlds is going to be difficult overall, and I think I don't want to be the madman playing Noivern. I think I should leave that to some other creative type. But maybe if you are the person who is in love with Noivern, who've always loved playing item lock decks and think that this guy is being undersold, you could take this list and see how different it is to yours and start testing with it. Because I believe this is a good basic baseline for you guys to go off of and start hitting those Wally combos, start getting the DDE in hand thanks to the Energy Loto, and really just establish that lock as quickly and as effectively as possible, because it is still, at the end of the day, very, very powerful to shut your opponent out of maybe like a quarter of their deck. So yeah, still a really, really strong card. Looking at matchups, he does have a couple of awkward ones, to be honest. Volcanion and Guardi are both expected to be very large at the World Championships. Guardi, even though they are a Stage 2 deck, they will play Diancie at times. Even playing things like a Alolan Vulpix is going to be awkward for you, because our damage is capped at 50 rather than 60, so sometimes the Vulpix actually tanks hits and gets 2 beacons off. And if they're able to do that, they can start finding Curliers, they can start evolving up, and that's going to be really bad for you. And we're pretty much all in on the Devolve against Guardi. I don't think it's an auto loss if you do play things like Bats plus Espeon or Koko plus Espeon, but it's not going to be one you want to face too often. And Volcanion, I believe, is actually your hardest matchup, because they are not hugely item focused anymore. They have Brooklet Hill to start finding their Pokemon. They basically only need to find energy to run through us, and they are a deck that also can ramp over the 200 HP barrier on certain terms, especially if they have the Starmie set up. They can guarantee Steam Ups to hit 200 damage and knock out our Noiverns, whilst in response we're not going to be doing too much back to them. The spread combo isn't going to be too great either, and they're not reliant on special energy, so our locks aren't very effective against Volcanion, which is a bit of a shame. And the final issue is going to be Alolan Ninetales, because they play so many Rough Seas. Again, the issue is that they have Vulpix, so they can still get set up even whilst under item lock. And Rough Seas undoing a lot of our damage also means that we can never really get an effective Devolve combo going against them. So we really don't have a plan A or B against Alolan Ninetales, because we need to continue to attack to keep the lock going, whilst at the same time it plays into their GX attack. So many reasons why Alolan Ninetales is also a very bad matchup for you. So I've been chatting a lot about Noivern, but I would love to hear your opinions down below. Will he show up for Worlds? Is this me just trying my best to cover every base, to make sure that I haven't forgotten about this card? Because, you know, I've seen item lock in the past, I've seen it be devastating in almost every form we've ever had it in the TCG. And this card seems to have a bunch of flaws, but at the same time, the package that it presents, the item lock, the special energy lock, and the spread, all of it in one nice, neat card, is just too tasty to pass up, I think. So I would love to see people get creative and make Noivern work for Worlds, because he is a very cool card, and card design actually as well. So yeah, for me, I think not many people will brave Noivern, but if someone gets it right, it could end up going all the way, because, man, item lock is still just so damn strong. So please leave a like to this video if you did. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. For now, though, it has been Joe from OmniPoke, and I'll be seeing you guys next time. Cheers.